We welcome you to another edition of Being Well Informed. My name is Claudia Barber, and I host this podcast and YouTube version of Being Well Informed, where we educate. It is an educational podcast that we have formed to share information. And this particular fine afternoon, we are pleased to have with us the person of Thornell Jones, who has a large history in the area of education. But today's topic has to do with sailing, another opportunity for all. Welcome, Thornell Jones, to our podcast.
Good to be here, Judge Barber. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, indeed. And our topic today is sailing, another opportunity for all. Tell us about yourself and how you got involved in sailing and the boating industry.
It might surprise you, but when I was 5 years old, I think I got a little upset with my mother and told her I was running away. She says, "Oh, can I give you a sandwich to take?" And I went down to the river and I saw sailing. I could not believe how beautiful it was, these boats sailing around. I also learned when I got home that I wasn't allowed to go sail because it was segregated. That was in New Jersey.
Okay. What year was this?
I went off to college ultimately and got involved with technology. I got involved with computers. Actually sold computers for a while and made 100% club. And with these companies, they want you to do more, so they give you benefits. We went to conferences where it was all about fun. Learned some, but it was all about fun. Most of the guys went golfing. I went sailing. And I learned that sailing is just a wonderful thing. But I didn't get to really learn how to sail until I was 53. I actually took a course in boating, took 2 courses in boating with the Coast Guard Auxiliary. And I joined the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and then I went and took a sailing course up in Maine. Why did I go to Maine? Just because I had already moved out to Annapolis to be near sailing because I really did want to sail. So I learned how to sail in a very tough environment up in Maine, and it was exhilarating. And then I came back to Annapolis and nosed around the water, and I found Eastport Yacht Club, and I got involved there, and it's been a good thing. I learned about sailing, about racing sailboats, and I got involved in managing sailboat races. And ultimately, I ran the Friday night sailboat races at Eastport Yacht Club for 6 or 8 years. And I, because of my involvement with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, I was invited to become a member of the Maryland Boat Act Advisory Committee. And on that committee, the responsibility was to help set the regulations on all the waters of the state of Maryland. So I got to go all over the state of Maryland, inland and on the coasts. And I had already been sailing all up and down the bay because the people in my flotilla had sailboats and loved to sail here. And ultimately, I sailed to New York. I sailed to Florida. I've sailed in the Bahamas and in the Caribbean. It was great.
What however, led you to start a camp for a sailing and kayaking camp for Blacks?
The problem that we have in this society is everything is segregated. It's still segregated because historically it was segregated. Now, I've learned since that sailboat racing really started with rich men having gigantic boats, 120, 200 feet
Mm.
in length. And over time, they made smaller and smaller sailboats. And and so the boats that I was sailing on was somewhere around 25 to 40 feet long. And it was a lot of fun doing that, but I did not see many Black people. And so I'm talking about everywhere I went, I didn't see many Black people.
Mm.
So I figured during COVID that it'd be a good time to get some kids out on the water because, you can't stay home but so long when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what gave us the idea to do that.
That's wonderful. You also mentioned having an interest as a young person. Now, I remember school, and I don't remember sailing courses being offered. Has that changed? Do you know?
That's a great question. The answer is no, not in most schools. There are some schools that teach sailing and have sailing. For instance, my granddaughter learned to sail when she was 6 years old, and we kept her sailing, and she went off to college and sailed on the racing team at college. But our schools here, even though Annapolis is called the sailing capital of the world, they don't
Yes,
teach sailing in school. They have sailboat racing and they have teams at these schools. But guess what? Those teams are actually part of the yacht club racing. The
I
kids
see.
who sail on those teams typically belong to yacht clubs. Now, there is one school here I've recently learned, Indian Creek. Indian Creek actually bought their own sailboats and they have their own teams, and the kids in the school actually learn how to sail and go sail and race on their team
They
without
actually
having
race.
they race and without having taken training at other sail clubs. They actually race. It's
Okay.
wonderful.
So that exists.
Only at Indian Creek. All the rest of them, the sailboat racing is done by members of yacht clubs.
Now, what we have scrolling across our screen, wcgmd.org. What website is that?
That's a website for World Class Grads Maryland, which is a nonprofit focused on making sure that the blueprint for Maryland is successful.
Okay.
We're doing that because every child needs to
Mm-hmm.
have every opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to participate in everything in our society. Because that has not been the case, we are missing lots of income in the state of Maryland because our young people aren't prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, many young people go to jail because they don't know there are opportunities for them in this life. You don't go to jail when you know there's opportunity. You
Mm-hmm.
go to jail because you're looking for something because you don't have opportunity. So everything is everything. All the things that we do have something to do with whether we're successful or not.
Are there grants for pro sailing uh, opportunities, or grants for schools, or grants for nonprofits? What's the outlook?
Well, that's a good question. The sailing experience that we had with these young people, sailing and kayaking, actually, we got a grant from the county because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
There really was a need to get some kids outside of their communities and involved in other things.
Right.
And I have looked around to see where more opportunities for funding these things are. Don't know exactly where they are at this time, have not found any except U.S. Sailing. U.S. Sailing is the organization that supports sailing racing all over the U.S., and they're also involved in international racing. But aside from them, I have not found um, anywhere that specifically has grants for teaching sailing or for sailing activity, because sailing could be expensive and there needs to be some money to help children travel and sail. Just like the school takes their young people off to play football in different places, they need to do the same thing with sailing.
Hmm.
Sailing and kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding. I mean, I told you this all started with great big boats. Well, we're down to boats, effectively boats that are boards that may be 4 feet long or less, that have a fin on the bottom. And these boards, you control them because they have a lithium ion battery that drives a propeller. And
Hmm.
as you get started, it lifts up out of the water, and you can ride around and turn and everything, and you can go up to 35 miles an hour with those boards. That's boating. And we're not doing that because we're not on the water.
Mm.
We're not on the water mainly because of racism. What we've
Okay.
done is drive Black people away from the water. We used to own a lot of waterfront around Annapolis. There's
Hmm.
very little that we own now around Annapolis. And that's because real estate interests have driven Black people out so they can remodel and raise the prices on housing at the water's level. Now, what we're trying to do ultimately is to have sustained sailing and boating for Black kids all over the Annapolis area. And ultimately, we'll bring that around. I'm working with people still trying to make that happen. It's very difficult to do these things because there's not a lot of money around to do it.
How can parents become more involved in getting their children motivated to consider sailing as another opportunity?
That's great. Um, Parents oftentimes don't take their children down to swim. You do need to swim in order um, to sail in small boats. Now, for
Okay.
large boats, you don't have to be able to swim. You're going to wear a life jacket anyway.
Okay.
But you do know how to swim if you're going to sail in a small boat. The schools try to help children feel safe in the water, but I'm not sure whether parents continue doing that. Now, how do they have their kids learn how to sail? There are sailing schools. Yacht clubs have sailing programs, and there are sailing schools for children.
Okay.
Annapolis Sailing School has children's programs. Eastport Yacht Club has children's programs, and you don't have to be a member of the club.
Okay.
I'm not sure about Annapolis Yacht Club membership being required or not, but they also have sailing school. There are sailing schools in some communities, like
Okay.
Cape St. Clair has sailing school. There's some other communities around the bay, around the rivers, the streams, creeks that have sailing schools. Now, typically, a sailing school might cost, if it's a yacht club and they have a lot of boats and a big program, it's going to cost somewhere around $400 or more a week.
Okay.
That's pretty high.
Yeah.
Some of the community sailing programs are less expensive
Okay.
because they're part of the community. But yacht clubs, it's a little higher because even though they're part of the community, it's a separate part of the yacht club, and a yacht club may think of it as helping their members to their membership over a long period of time, but it's not a big part of building up the uh, the yacht club itself. There are other ways to learn how to sail.
Hmm.
Adults, for instance, could learn how to sail by joining sailing communities. There are many of them around. In fact, I believe there's a group of Black sailors who have a club in Annapolis. They don't own a club house, but some of them may own boats and then they share.
Okay.
That's another way. And you don't have to join a Black club to do that. There's singles on sailboats. They there are people who own boats that love to sail with other people who join singles on sailboats, and those people all they have lessons. They learn about sailing. They learn about safety. They learn about keeping the sailboat up, how to keep the engine going, keep the insides right,
Hmm.
and then they share boats. The skippers will say when they can go out, and then the other people bring the food, and they have a great time. Sometimes they go raft up 25, 30 sailboats, raft up in a great big circle, and people walk from boat to boat to boat and have a lot of fun. Not many Black people are doing that. It's a
Oh,
shame. See, that's what I'm talking about. There's so many ways to have fun on the water.
and we're missing out.
We are missing out.
So, in that situation or that scenario, how can we change that? That dynamic of what these are missed opportunities, and how do we change the trajectory? Do we go to school boards to have them involve themselves with offering more sailing classes? How do we start?
Well, that's one of the best questions yet. because because I and the more I think about the schools, excuse me,
Hmm.
the more I think about the schools, the more I realize there is absolutely no reason for spending the amount of money that they spend on football and not spending money on sailing. You
Mm.
can't play football when you're 85, but you can sail.
Hmm.
Okay. So we're talking about lifelong activity here that's good for your mind, good for your body, good for your thinking. It's just plain good for you. And I'm going to tell you, contact sports are not good for your body.
Hmm.
They may be good for your mind because you do have to do a lot of thinking,
Yes.
but not good for your body.
Well, some folks are aware that the city of Annapolis has a harbor master office at the city dock, and they hire assistant harbor masters and other dock support help. And they also have offered from time to time summer internship programs. So uh, it's important for us to know how to make the connection to become more involved in internship types of programs.
Now you've hit on a very important part of any on the water activity for Black people.
Hmm.
We have here in Annapolis and in this area $1 billion marine industry that is short on workmen.
Mm,
But you can't get a job in that industry if you don't know anything about it. You
okay.
won't even go looking for a job there if you don't know anything about it. So, one of the aspects of this sailing program that we had with the boys was for them to understand that there's an industry here and they need to learn about that industry. We took them around to yacht clubs, to marinas. We had a, um, an owner of a marina come in and talk about the work activity in his marina, which was primarily on engines. We took them to
Hmm.
excuse me, at the end of the 2 summers, well, actually, the first summer we took them to the harbor master so they
Okay.
can learn right up front
Okay.
that there's an opportunity.
Yes.
The second summer, I'm so sorry, we took them to several businesses so they can learn, one, what people are looking for when they're being interviewed, and number two, so they can learn how to have the confidence to go ask for a job
In the sailing industry.
in the sailing industry.
Wow.
And two of them at the end of the summer actually got jobs that we had taken them to let them go in and interview.
Mm-hmm.
They got jobs. Um, that they could work on the weekends when they weren't playing sports.
Okay.
So it wasn't that they had to work the whole week or anything like that. Those people needed help, and they figured out how to work the help in when the boys were available.
Marvelous. Yes.
So we
And
took
that's
them to some other organizations that people need to know about.
mm-hmm.
There's a lot of jobs with U.S. sailing.
Okay.
I mean, U.S. Sailboat shows. It's U.S. sailing and powerboat shows.
Okay.
There's a lot of jobs with them. And ultimately, you might even get to be moving boats in and out of the city dock area.
Mm-hmm.
These boys actually are moving boats around now. And we didn't do any motor boating, but they're picking that up too.
They're picking the motorboating part up too.
Right.
That's
right.
fabulous.
It's really important for people to know their jobs, and the people who are running these marinas, they need people.
They do.
Oh, so another aspect of this was I took the boys to visit a boat that this couple had owned for 30 years. And they were having trouble with their diesel engines.
Mm-hmm.
It took them about a year to get their diesel engines fixed because the older engines don't have a lot of people around who can fix them. And it costs thousands of dollars. Now, who thinks about spending thousands of dollars to fix their engine?
Mm-hmm.
But that's true in the marine industry.
Okay.
And then I also we had a session where they learned about the colleges that you can go
Mm-hmm.
to study marine industry. Now, they all know about the Naval Academy, but they don't know about the Coast Guard Academy.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know about the Merchant Marine Academy.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know about the Army and the Air Force academies. By the way, all those schools are free. It's a little tough to get into, but they're free.
But
They
they're
even give you a little
free.
money.
Wow.
So if you don't know that, you don't think in those terms.
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. And that's why I think it's fabulous that you're having this conversation.
Yes. And I'm thrilled that you're able to share with us so much information that enlightens and illuminates us on the sailing industry. So what was that that first experience like when you had this group of boys that you took out sailing?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, those boys were really good. They did know that what we were trying to do would lead somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the first year, we never got the boats that we had expected to get before we started. And that part was disappointing, but we did get them out on some larger boats and they had fun. And they realized they had never had an experience like that. So this year, when they're out taking sailing lessons, because they took 3 weeks of sailing lessons at Eastport Yacht Club, they loved it. So a reporter came and asked one of the boys, what do you like about it? he said, "Oh, it's just wonderful. There are no cares when we're sailing and the wind isn't high. There's no cares at all.
Wow.
It's nothing like it in life." He's absolutely right. There's nothing like it. Have you been
Well,
out sailing, Claudia?
no, I've been on boats before, cruises before, but not actual sailing on smaller boats.
Well, you will next
Oh,
summer.
uh-oh. I'm thrilled and looking forward to it. It's such an interesting industry, but many people have often thought for the longest time it's something for the elite. It's something for the wealthy. It's something for the aristocrats, because that's what many people associate yacht clubs with.
So here's the thing. I told you about all those great big boats and everything. But there's a guy here in Annapolis, Vincent Leggett,
Hmm.
who has an organization called Blacks of the Chesapeake.
Yes, he
And it's
does.
all about how Black people used to be the predominant people out on the water, bringing in seafood for people to purchase.
Hmm.
And their knowledge of the water was phenomenal. And we have let our children not know about it. That's crazy.
Right,
That's totally crazy.
right.
So we,
Exactly
we
right.
we've got to get back to recognizing, we used to be the masters of the water out here.
And we can still continue that from that aspect.
That's correct.
So oftentimes when you think of Blacks of the Chesapeake, what types of work are they doing?
Okay, the Blacks of the Chesapeake has focused on the era when Blacks were out uh, collecting oysters and crabs.
Okay.
Okay, and there are people on land separating out the crab meat
Hmm.
and shucking oysters, and we were very big in the marine industry, in the seafood industry here in Maryland, and many of those jobs have disappeared. But if you go to the Maritime Museum of Annapolis, the Annapolis Maritime Museum, you can see an example of the work that was done during those days and the kind of vessels that Black people used to make right
Mm.
here in Annapolis and on the Eastern Shore. Yeah, we were involved in every aspect of boating, including making the sails for sailboats.
So that's huge. But this industry is larger than what we know, or or what we can think or imagine. So in terms of outreach, how do people connect with you as a resource for again continuing your sailing and boating or kayaking camp during the summer?
I'm glad you asked that. One way to contact me is to use my email address, which is thornell.jones.16@gmail.com. My name's on the screen,
Mhm.
and it's thornell.jones.16@gmail.com. Just send me it and put in the title boating. Because I'm involved with a lot of things, but I'm interested in boating. I will answer your emails. And we are working today to put together a group to make sure that we have something going on next summer and thenceforth.
Well, that
Keeping
is very encouraging.
So anybody who wants to join that is welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thornell Jones. You have really been a blessing and sharing with us what we need to know about sailing as another opportunity for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.